2 years following my brother's enigmatic disappearance, a text from him surfaced. It bore a simple yet chilling command. Never ascend the staircase at home. He had been missing for 2 years, vanishing without a trace. Yet, this very night, a message from him pierced the silence. Avoid the staircase at home. The message sent shivers down my spine and seeded confusion in my mind. Our home has always been a conventional single-story flat. There's never been any sort of staircase within its walls. I hurriedly dialed my brother's phone, desperate to uncover where he had vanished to over the last 2 years. Why hadn't he returned home if he was still alive? I was bursting with questions for him, yet the phone remained unanswered. After that last message, my brother had vanished once again. Our parents rarely spent their evenings at home, neglecting my brother and me throughout our upbringing. In our childhood, our father's harsh discipline often escalated to physical abuse. I vividly remember the most brutal episode, when my brother's arm was broken as he shielded me from our father's fury. Through his pain, my young brother stood silently before me, a silent sentinel of suffering. Following my brother's disappearance, I searched for him with frantic desperation. Our parents showed such indifference towards him that they didn't even bother to file a missing persons report. On the verge of going to the police station with his last message, I suddenly stopped dead in my tracks. Suddenly, a mysterious staircase appeared in our living room. This dark red staircase vanished into sheer darkness above, obscuring whatever lay at its end. My phone then burst into a frenzied vibration, bombarded with messages from my brother. "Don't go up! Don't go up!" The staircase sent a shiver down my spine. Every cell in my body screamed in unison, a forewarning not to ascend. But just then, a stuffed bear rolled down the stairs. The teddy bear stopped at my feet, its shiny black eyes piercingly fixed on me. My heart pounded faster. This toy was familiar, a birthday gift I had lovingly crafted for my brother. And like my brother, it had disappeared until now. With trembling hands, I picked up the teddy bear. Inside, I discovered something unexpected. A note. "Tao Tao. Save me. Hurry up the stairs. I'm trapped above." The handwriting was unmistakably my brother's. But simultaneously, my phone erupted in violent vibrations. Dozens of texts from my brother flooded in. "Don't go up. Avoid those stairs." In that instant, I froze, torn between messages and memories. Should I trust the note or the flurry of texts? But one certainty emerged. My brother might well be somewhere above these stairs. After a brief hesitation, I decisively climbed the first step. I needed to find my brother. At this moment, my heart thudded wildly. First step, second step. I ascended each stair until I reached the top. Suddenly, my pupils narrowed in shock. Before me lay an exact replica of my home. The same living room. Even the dining table bore the remains of the apple one had eaten. For a split second, I wondered if the staircase had been nothing but an illusion. I turned around. The dark red staircase had disappeared, as if it had never existed. Was it all just my imagination? As I was beginning to unwind, the door to my parents' room creaked open. My mother, supposedly working late, emerged from the room. Dressed in pajamas and yawning, she looked at me, puzzled. "Jiang Tao, what are you doing up and about at this hour?" she asked, her face lined with impatience. I quickly insisted I wasn't doing anything. Just as I was about to ask why she was home, a cold shiver raced from my feet to my forehead. Something was distinctly off. A powerful unease made me shiver uncontrollably. I gazed intently at my mother's face. That's when I noticed the anomaly. Her face was reversed. Specifically, the left and right sides were swapped. The prominent mole that usually adorned her left cheek was now on the right. A terrifying realization struck me. I might not be in my actual home. This was not a figment of my imagination. Then my father appeared from his room. Seeing his face clearly, my heart plummeted. His facial features, too, were reversed. His eyes had always been distinctive, double-lidded on the left, single on the right. But now it was the right eye that was double-lidded and the left single-lidded. These people were not my real parents. With this realization, I tried to flee to my room. But my mother seized my hand. "Don't go. I have a question for you. Did you take my money?" She stared at me, her face ominously stern. I looked down and gasped sharply. "Have you ever seen someone with their palms and the backs of their hands switched?" My mother's palms faced upward, each fingernail lacquered in vibrant red. Her nails were excessively long and finely pointed. "Why are you gazing at Mom's hands? Is there something amiss?" she inquired as her face crept closer. My heart nearly escaped my chest. "Mom, it's nothing, really. Your hands are quite lovely," I managed, my smile tight and unconvincing. Her mood wasn't lightened by my awkward compliment. "You little wretch, don't deflect. Did you take my $100? That term, little wretch, echoed through my upbringing. Even my best friend couldn't fathom a mother who addressed her daughter so harshly. But that was her way. She wouldn't allow me long hair or skirts. Anything that might make me appear pretty was brutally vetoed. Indeed, 2 days ago I took her money, needing it to cover my semester's fees. I had implored her for just $100, but she turned me down with clear impatience. Left with no alternative, I resorted to taking it. "Very well, you little wretch, you've resorted to theft now?" Her eyes, narrowed into slits, shone with malevolence. "It seems I haven't punished you in a while. Perhaps you've forgotten the taste of pain." My father stood in front of me, his lips unnaturally twisted into a grin. I stealthily eyed his hands from the corner of my eye. The sight sent shivers through me. His palms and the backs of his hands were grotesquely reversed. But what truly terrified me was seeing him retrieve a massive cleaver from the kitchen, as long as half my arm. In that instant, I felt as if I had plummeted into icy depths. The cleaver was rusted over, its surface marred with dark, reddish stains. Before my 10th birthday, my father had brandished this very cleaver to terrorize my brother and me. He had even used it to slash my arm in a chilling display of indifference. After it was deemed unusable, it had disappeared from our home. And yet, here it was once more. I backed away in horror, pleading desperately, "I'm sorry. It wasn't on purpose. Dad, please don't do this." The cleaver not only bore rust but also specks of dried blood, indistinct whether from human or animal. My heart thudded uncontrollably as my brother's voice suddenly echoed from my room. "Jiang Tao, come here, quick!" Panicked, I scrambled to my bedroom. After shutting the door, I immediately locked it. "Brother," I called out, my voice trembling with tears. The room was a mirror image of mine. The exam paper I'd half finished tonight lay silently on the desk. The wall clock was broken, forever stopped at 10 o'clock. Yet, there was no sign of my brother. I leaned against the door, my body gradually sliding to the floor as exhaustion overtook me. The fear of the unknown tightened its grip on my heart. "Brother, where are you, really?" I then noticed a white paper on the bed. I picked it up. Suddenly, 2 words formed on it. "Jiang Tao." It was written in my brother's hand. Excitement surged through me. "Brother, where are you?" I cried out, struggling to control my emotions. Silence met my plea. More writing appeared on the paper. "Jiang Tao, the staircase is a nexus of countless parallel universes, and we aren't in the same one. There's a fleeting moment when our universes align, but it never lasts more than 5 minutes. My time to communicate is almost over. I've tried to stop it, but it deceived you into coming here. You must hold on to what I'm about to say. This is what I've learned about the rules of this parallel universe after 2 years. Never go against our parents' wishes, or they will punish you. Do not open the windows to shout. It will disturb the neighbor's sleep. The bathroom is a safe place. In any danger, hide there as we did in childhood. But remember, the light should be yellow dot. Though the bathroom is safe, do not stay longer than 15 minutes. Avoid looking under the bed, and if you accidentally do, hold your breath immediately dot. If you see our parents in red pajamas, immediately take refuge in the bathroom. They cannot follow you there. You can leave through the front door, but remember, Building 4 has no elevator. If you encounter one, Do not enter. Be wary. There are no cats in our complex. Any cat you see should not be trusted. Reverse. The last rule was hastily written, obscured by thick ink. Only the character fawn was visible. The sheet was filled with other bizarre, illogical rules that baffled me. I quickly grabbed a pen from the nightstand and wrote on the paper. Brother, have you been living in a parallel universe these past 2 years? Almost immediately, a response appeared on the paper. Yes, you only have 6 hours. Otherwise, even I can't predict when the staircase will appear again. The handwriting of this last sentence grew increasingly erratic. Jiang Tao, always remember. Your brother loves you. You must find a way to escape. The writing on the paper abruptly halted, not even finishing the last stroke of the word, leave. It was clear to me that the overlap in time and space had come to an end. My phone displayed 11 p.m. This indicated the staircase would reappear at 5 a.m. Unconsciously, I peered under the bed. It was pitch black, as if harboring something profoundly sinister. I quickly withdrew my gaze. Taking a deep breath, I reread the crucial rules one more time and pocketed them. At that moment, a knock sounded at the door. Jiang Tao, your father is furious. I advise you to come out and apologize. My mother's sharp voice called out, laced with an odd excitement. I bit my lip, my body quaking with fear. Come out now, you wretch. The door was violently shaken, accompanied by forceful banging. I took a deep breath and hastily slipped under my blankets. Jiang Tao, this is the last time I'll ask. I hope you'll come out willingly. My father's voice was disturbingly low, filled with raw bitterness and malice. I clamped my hand over my mouth, stifling any cries of fear. Silence finally settled outside. Had they given up? Just as I relaxed, my father's voice unexpectedly broke the quiet. Dad can see you pretending to sleep. I trembled as I cautiously peered out. Their shadows, cast through the crack under the door, were unnervingly elongated. I stared at the shadows, feeling increasingly uneasy. The shadows showed their legs. Normally, the top of a shadow should be the head, but all I saw were legs. In that instant, it felt as if my blood had turned to ice. They were standing upside down. That meant they could see every move I made. Shaking, I crouched down. I saw 2 pairs of eyes under the door, directly staring at me. At that moment, my nerves were stretched to the breaking point. But I had to keep my composure. I pretended to casually pick up the phone that had fallen to the ground. How did my phone end up on the floor? My hands trembled uncontrollably. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed they were still watching, staring relentlessly at me. Then, I heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. My heart leapt into my throat. The next second, the door swung open. My parents stood in the doorway, smiling at me. Their smiles were strange. Though their lips curled upward, their eyes remained cold and unyielding. Their heads were oddly tilted at a 45-degree angle as they continued to smile. A deep, menacing intuition urged me to flee immediately. But I was a step too late. My mother's skeletal hand abruptly grabbed my hair. She squinted. Her dark, narrow pupils bored into me. When did your hair get so long? Didn't I forbid you to grow it out? The pull on my scalp was excruciating. Her strength was immense, as if intending to rip out my hair from the roots. They forced me to my knees. The rusty cleaver rested coldly against my neck. Jiang Tao, Dad has always said, disobedient children must be punished. My father stated, his beady eyes glinting, his smile widening grotesquely. In that moment, the fear of death froze me solid. Out of sheer desperation, I yelled, "Brother is here!" There was a chilling click. My parents' heads snapped around 180 degrees. The gruesome sound of their skulls cracking filled the air. In that critical moment, I raced towards the bathroom. The light inside was on, shrouded in a red aura. The bathroom is the only safe place, just like in our childhood. They don't know we used to hide there. But remember, the light should be yellow. Yellow? I paused, my hand hovering in midair. The bathroom's frosted glass emitted a chilling crimson light. Jiang Tao, Going to hide in the bathroom like you used to as a child? My father's voice resonated from behind me. He approached leisurely, his face adorned with a bone-chilling smile. I sensed something was amiss. He didn't rush at me as before but seemed expectant, almost as if he knew something. If the bathroom was truly safe, he would have tried everything to stop me from entering. Unless a bathroom bathed in red light was a trap. Yet I had to divert his attention. My hand rested on the bathroom doorknob, slowly turning it. Sure enough, my father's smile grew broader. Just as I was about to open the door, I spun around and sprinted to the main entrance, flung it open, and raced out into the night. As the door closed, I caught a fleeting glimpse of my father's face, marked by resentment and frustration. I exhaled deeply, relieved. This meant he couldn't follow me immediately. A rule my brother had written on the paper read, "If you leave the house, your parents cannot immediately follow." Yet I couldn't afford to relax. Ahead lay the familiar narrow corridor. Its walls were plastered with the usual relentless ads seen in reality, and even a flyer for a lost cat hung in place. The aging overhead incandescent bulb flickered intermittently, emitting a sizzling sound. The corridor was eerily quiet. It normally had poor soundproofing. Whenever I came home from school, I could hear the sounds of mahjong tiles clacking, couples arguing, TVs blaring, and children crying. But now the corridor was as silent as the grave, so quiet that all I could hear was my own heart pounding like thunder. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the corridor. They seemed to come from just around the corner. However, there was no shadow to be seen. My throat felt as if it was blocked, painfully dry. More footsteps followed in quick succession, as if many people were walking briskly. Whispers filled my ears. It seemed many people were talking, and yet, there was clearly no one near me. Jiang Tao. Jiang Tao. My name echoed down the corridor, called by a voice light and utterly unfamiliar. I gritted my teeth. If you hear someone call your name in the hallway, do not respond or turn around. The calls came from behind me, but I was aware that my apartment lay at the end of this corridor. Thus, only a wall was behind me. It was impossible for anyone to be there. Ignoring everything, I ran forward. When had this hallway become so endlessly long? The stairwell, usually just a minute's walk away, now seemed unreachable even after nearly 10 minutes of fast walking. I increased my pace, my forehead slick with a cold sweat. At that moment, I heard a creak. The door of apartment 1407, next to me, swung open. A middle-aged man had lived in 1407 since my childhood. When my father had beaten me brutally in my brother's absence, I once fled for help. Acting on instinct, I pounded desperately on this neighbor's door, begging him to save me and let me in. He did open the door, but he didn't let me in. Instead, he merely stood behind it, smiling as he watched my father pull me back. It was only after his death last year from a sudden illness that the nightmare finally dissolved from my memories. My heart hammered against my chest. Logic screamed at me to flee at once. Yet my feet were inexplicably frozen. Inside room 1407, darkness enveloped everything like a gaping void. A desiccated, pale hand reached out from the abyss, grasping the door frame. Brown spots modeled the familiar hand. But that man had unmistakably died last year from gas poisoning. I had seen his body carried away, his face ghastly pale and his eyes grotesquely bulging. Jiang Tao, run! I urged myself silently, desperate. But my feet were as if anchored to the ground, paralyzed by an overwhelming terror. From within the dark, a face emerged slowly. My body quivered uncontrollably. That same ghastly face and bulging eyes of a man long dead. The man smiled at me. It mirrored that dreadful afternoon when he had smiled, holding the door open as my father dragged me away. A scream was trapped in my throat. The man's voice was a hoarse, chilling whisper. "Do you still wish to enter?" I shook my head fervently. Then, the ominous creak of the door opening echoed from behind. "Jiang Tao, you little wretch!" The raspy growl of my father's voice pierced the air from behind me. My heart dropped like a stone. The rule had merely stated a temporary prohibition on their exit. But now he was free to leave. Jiang Tao, you've been terribly disobedient. Daddy must punish you. There was a disturbing zest in my father's tone. Now, you may come in. The man at the door offered me a grotesquely stiff smile. It was as though time had spiraled back to that fateful afternoon when I was 13. That paralyzing fear once again cloaked me completely. Tears cascaded uncontrollably down my face. At that moment, my brother's voice reached me. Jiang Tao, go forward. It was like a shaft of light slicing through the enveloping darkness. Suddenly, my feet sprang to life. I dashed ahead, fueled by raw urgency. My phone displayed 2 more hours until the stairs would manifest again. But the hallway stretched interminably, and no matter how fervently I ran, the stairway eluded me. Despair cloaked me once more. And behind me, my father's footsteps bore down relentlessly. Jiang Tao, once I catch you, I swear, I will end you, you wretch. The sounds grew nearer. Suddenly, the rumble of wheels echoed. A strange, familiar scent of disinfectant wafted up to me. Abruptly, a blinding light flashed before me. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Darkness enveloped the corridor once more. Doors burst open along the corridor, one after another. Pallid faces emerged from the shadows, staring blankly at me. Just when I feared my fate would mirror that dark afternoon at 13, a cat's meow echoed in the distance. An orange cat materialized a short distance ahead. I was stunned. It bore a striking resemblance to the orange cat from my memories. When I was 12, my brother and I secretly nursed a wounded stray orange cat back to health. It was endearingly affectionate. I hid it in my room, undetected, as our parents seldom came home at night, and it lived with us for several months. I named it Little Orange. Little Orange was dearly loving. But on that fateful day, my father staggered home drunk. Whenever he drank, my brother and I hid to escape his wrath. But he discovered Little Orange. Even as my brother and I frantically intervened, begging him to spare our pet, he mercilessly grasped Little Orange by the neck and hurled it down from the upstairs, right before our eyes. Little Orange convulsed a few times on the pavement. I screamed as I rushed downstairs, tears streaming, desperate to get Little Orange to the hospital. But it was too late. With its final ounce of strength, Little Orange tenderly licked my hand. From that day on, I never again brought home a stray. I realized that if I rescued them out of fleeting compassion, all they faced was eventual death. Yet now Little Orange was before me again. It came to me, nuzzling my hand affectionately and emitting a soft meow. It seemed as though Little Orange was leading me. Do not trust the cat. This rule, stark on a white paper, made me pause. Seeing my hesitation, Little Orange meowed once more. As my father's footsteps ominously closed in, I bit my lip and kept pace with Little Orange. Following it, I felt an inexplicable surge of strength fill me. The eerie pale faces that surrounded us receded. The oppressive darkness in the corridor began to lift. At last, the staircase downward came into view. Just as I was about to descend in relief, a hand viciously grabbed my neck. Jiang Tao, where do you think you can run to? My father's menacing voice chilled the air behind me. A frigid wave of despair engulfed me. But in an instant, Little Orange leapt high into the air. My father let out a horrific scream and released me. Without hesitation, I scooped up Little Orange and raced down the stairs. I finally reached the next floor. Little Orange nestled quietly in my embrace. I had arrived at the 5th floor, and there was only 1 hour left until the staircase appeared. I had to get to the 1st floor within this hour. The dim lights flickered in the corridor of the 5th floor. At that moment, I heard the chaotic footsteps again, and the whispers of people. But this time, cradling Little Orange, my fear had subsided considerably. Yet that chilling sensation crept up on me once more. This time, I smoothly made my way to the staircase leading to the next level. But instead of stairs, an elevator stood before me. The panel indicated it was at -10, a floor that didn't exist in Building 4. Suddenly, The floor numbers on the display began to climb wildly. Soon, the thunderous operation of the elevator broke the silence. With a ding, the elevator doors slid open at the 5th floor. A profound terror surged within me. Warning: Building 4 lacks an elevator. Do not enter any elevator. Yet, apart from the elevator, there were no other paths downward. The elevator doors parted with a ding. Cradling little Orange, I instinctively stepped back. Inside stood a figure cloaked in white, a matching mask obscuring all but his somber eyes. His pupils were unnervingly dark, fixing their gaze on me. Jiang Tao, step inside. His voice was unnaturally eerie and raspy. Retreating further, I shook my head. Abruptly, little Orange squirmed from my arms and darted into the elevator. Little Orange, get out, I cried out in desperation. Yet, on this occasion, little Orange stood steadfast within the elevator, deaf to my desperate calls. There's little time left, Jiang Tao, reiterated the figure clad in white. It was then that my brother's voice surfaced in my ears. Jiang Tao. Some contrary. His words came in fragments. I grasped only bits and pieces. Contrary. What was my brother attempting to convey? In a flash, awareness electrified me. A myriad of snippets intertwined into an expansive web within my mind. The visages of my mother and father were inversions of each other. The palms and backs of their hands were juxtaposed. On the white paper, obscured by ink, the final rule displayed just one word: opposite. Could it be that my brother was signaling that some rules are reversed? I swiftly pulled out the paper and turned it over. On its reverse, a hastily scribbled line of ink slowly became visible. Enter the elevator. Some rules are reversed. It's purposefully crafted to deceive you. Little Orange meowed persistently, sounding desperate. Jiang Tao, the elevator is closing. The figure in white noted, a flicker of regret in his gaze. The elevator doors gradually shut. In that crucial instant, I darted into the elevator. Breathing heavily, I leaned back against the wall. The doors sealed completely. The elevator plunged downwards. Suddenly, I felt a warm grip, reminiscent of my brother's hand. A blurry figure materialized before me. It bore a striking resemblance to my brother. The time on my phone showed 10 minutes until the staircase would appear. With a ding, I reached the ground floor. Finally, I stood on the 1st floor. Cradling little Orange, I tensely anticipated the emergence of the staircase. Only 5 minutes remained. Abruptly, my mother's piercing scream shattered the silence behind me. Jiang Tao, where can you possibly flee? Trembling, I spun around. Behind me loomed my mother's pallid face, her eyes bulging with exertion. Her skeletal arms snapped forward, clenching my shoulders, her nails sinking deep into my flesh. I felt excruciating pain. Panting heavily, my mother's inky pupils bore into me with malice. You are my child. I have the right to determine your life and death. She pulled me back with tremendous force. I fought back with all my might. Just then, the dark red staircase materialized behind us. The moment to return had come. I struggled with renewed urgency, but my mother's strength was formidable. Her face twisted into a malevolent grin. Jiang Tao, you can't escape. Just as I couldn't escape my mother's grip, she sneered. Suddenly, the oppressive force binding me evaporated. Someone had thrust my mother to the ground. My brother's voice cut through the chaos. He said icily, though Jiang Tao and I are your offspring, we are sovereign individuals. We will no longer succumb to your control. You are unworthy of motherhood. As the staircase materialized, time and space seemed to fold into one. Dark shadows swarmed behind my mother. These shadows howled as they swooped towards us. I won't let you leave. You are my children, mine. My mother cried out maniacally, charging towards me. But then, she was forcibly restrained on the ground. I knew instantly it was my brother. Jiang Tao, hurry! The staircase was fading away. Little Orange's cries grew more frantic and sharp. With tears clouding my vision, I cast a final glance behind before running resolutely towards the staircase. I stepped onto it just as it began to vanish. Suddenly, I was enveloped in blinding light. It felt as though someone was prying open my eyelids. "Doctor, the patient is awake," came an excited voice. A flurry of footsteps and multiple voices filled the air around me, echoing the whispers I had encountered in the corridor. "Jiang Tao," someone was calling out to me. "Jiang Tao, can you hear me?" The voice was familiar, one I had heard before in the corridor. "The surgery was incredibly successful, Jiang Tao. You've shown remarkable strength." I felt myself being lifted onto a stretcher and wheeled away. The scent of disinfectant filled my nostrils, the same I had detected in the corridor. Many people ushered me into a ward. I was met with pale, lifeless faces, the same ones I had glimpsed behind the doors in the corridor. Yet now, their eyes shone with sincere joy. "Jiang Tao, dear child, your surgery was a resounding success." The voice was hauntingly familiar. He was masked, revealing only his eyes. I gazed at him, stunned. It was the man from the elevator. In that instant, a torrent of memories overwhelmed me. I seized the doctor's hand, asking in a raspy voice, "Where is my brother?" "Your brother is still in surgery." Tears overwhelmed me, and I began to sob uncontrollably. I feared the worst for my brother. Memories I had suppressed surged forward. My brother hadn't simply disappeared. A week earlier, my father had stumbled home in a drunken fury. He was loudly lamenting his gambling losses. I had tried to avoid provoking him, but I needed 50 yuan for school fees. Reluctantly, I approached him, pleading for the money. He fixed a heavy, terrifying stare on me, his breath ragged, his eyes shining with a frightening ferocity. The stick came down on me relentlessly, time and again. I writhed in agony, begging him to stop. But he persisted, his eyes alight with a blood-red glee. The door swung open. I turned, hopeful, towards the door, but that hope swiftly vanished. My mother stood there, indifferent to the blood on the floor or my cries of pain. She coldly instructed, "Don't kill him, just be careful." Father's strikes did not subside in the slightest. He had been drinking and had lost money. He needed a vent, and I was it. Finally, my brother came home from school. Though only 2 years my senior, he had the stature of a young man. Upon seeing me barely clinging to life, he flew at our father in a frenzy. They clashed violently, but my brother was no match for our father, and he soon fell, bleeding profusely. Before I lost consciousness, the police arrived. My brother and I were loaded onto stretchers. "Jiang Tao, your brother's surgery was a success. You both are very fortunate," the doctor said, smiling. Overwhelmed, I broke down sobbing. I didn't know how my brother had escaped. He had fought desperately to restrain our mother, all so I could get away. Our recovery was swift. 3 days later, my brother and I strolled through the hospital grounds. We would be discharged in 3 days. Holding my hand, my brother answered my query. "Brother, how did you manage to escape?" It was Little Orange. Little Orange distracted our mother, and in the last second before the staircase vanished, "I followed you up," he recounted. My heart ached at his words. Just then, a cat's meow echoed nearby. A ginger cat sauntered up to my brother and me, affectionately springing onto our laps. Doctor's perspective. In my 40 years of practice, I've encountered an extraordinarily unusual case, Erie. In fact, as an adolescent psychologist, my days are filled with meeting young individuals battling various psychological issues. Recently, a case involving siblings truly startled me. These siblings had suffered extensive abuse and severe physical harm at their parents' hands, and were only rescued following life-threatening injuries inflicted by their father. Their parents are now incarcerated. At the behest of a welfare organization, I visited the hospital to offer them specialized psychological counseling. I've seen countless children scarred by prolonged abuse, domestic violence, emotional neglect, or manipulative behaviors from parents. Most exhibit significant psychological distress. Yet, these siblings displayed no psychological disorders. They relayed to me a captivating tale. Despite my doubts about its veracity, I documented their narrative. Back in the solitude of my therapy room, I pored over their story. A sudden chill gripped me as I realized how closely Jiang Tao's recounted experiences in a parallel dimension aligned with numerous facets of her real-life state during her coma. The clock on the wall was forever fixed at 10 o'clock, the very moment Jiang Tao was brought into the hospital. If this tale were her own creation, she would have been deeply comatose at the time, utterly unaware of the passing hours. Lighting a cigarette, I trembled as the narrative unfolded. The scent of disinfectant Jiang Tao sensed was unmistakably that of a hospital. The muddled footsteps and hushed whispers she picked up were those of doctors and nurses. The piercing light she experienced came from a doctor opening her eyes to examine them. She heard her name being called. It was indeed the doctor calling out to her. In the corridor, the ashen faces of the neighbors were like those of patients in an intensive care ward. I inhaled deeply, feeling the cold sweat soaking my back. The bathroom was deemed a sanctuary because Jiang Tao, once a child victim of parental abuse, used it as a refuge. The man she encountered in the elevator was, in fact, the surgeon who had once operated on her. I hesitate to guess whether Jiang Tao could have made it through if she had fallen for the deceit woven into those rules and missed her chance to step into the elevator. This case was so extraordinary and eerie that I excluded numerous details when presenting it to my students. I explained to them that it was a manifestation of Jiang Tao's inner world. Her parents took on monstrous forms because, in the depths of Jiang Tao's subconscious, they were monsters. After the lecture, someone stopped me. Professor Su. As I turned, I was greeted by Jiang Tao. She cradled a ginger cat in her arms, her face breaking into a smile as she saw me. We exchanged pleasantries briefly. Her brother, she mentioned, is sitting for the college entrance exams this year, his sights set on the university where I teach. He's determined to become one of your students, Professor Su, and later help more people like us, she explained. Jiang Tao's eyes curved into a smile, radiating a tender warmth.